Hey guys, it's Andy, and me and Colin just got done talking to Karl Hinkley out in Nebraska. He's the owner of Nowear BMX and Nowear Nonprofit. And we had a really awesome conversation with him about the building that he has, quarantine, how he started his company and everything. I will say that he had a little bit of a rough connection issue out there in Nebraska, but we had a really great conversation with him. So I hope you enjoy it. Hit that like button and subscribe, and we'll be doing more of these. Thanks.
All right, so I'll just kick this off. So Carl and I, we met back, I don't even know when it was. When was the first BYOB series?
I think we started the BYOB series, and I don't remember. I want to say it was 14. I think it was 2014. 13,
yeah, that
14.
Sounds about right. I think it might have been 14. So I remember I got in the car with a friend and just drove for 6 hours to literally the smallest town in Iowa.
Bondurant. Yep.
And I ended up doing a video for you, and we've been friends ever since.
Yep.
And it's been cool to watch everything that you're doing. I think the biggest thing, most notably, now that we're all stuck at home, you might have one of the best places to be stuck at. So how's that going for you?
It's really cool. Like the downtime. I mean, we're on 6 acres, so we feel really fortunate to have things to do and to have indoor place to ride and stuff like that. But we can't wait till this is all over so we can open up to everybody and share it with anyone that wants to come hang out.
Yeah, I was thinking, we'll get more into like the building a little bit later, but I know like one of the biggest reasons you built that was so that kids and their families and friends would have somewhere to go when they can't go anywhere else. And here it's unfortunate. How's that feel?
I'm not going to lie. It feels a little weird right now, though, that we just finished a giant big step that we're ready to like shout from the top of the building and parade everyone in during one of the craziest times in the world's history. So, while everything's kind of dormant, I don't know. It feels very weird right now. And I'm just stoked to get to that point where we can celebrate the big milestone we just passed.
Yeah, and I know that's probably feels kind of two ways on that. But so before we get into it, I know, since we've been friends and supporting each other's projects, you did come up to the Mucktown BMX Jam the one year. And we can talk about that if you want, but I just wanted to remind you, we got Colin on the call, and that's where you guys met, maybe briefly, but it was a good time for everything.
I remember a lot of rain and like a million people riding your indoor micro ramp.
It was the most micro ramp I think I've ever ridden.
I don't know if anyone's made a more micro ramp, but I remember it being a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Oh, so much fun. What was the quarter on the opposite side of the vert wall, Andy? Was it 1.5 feet?
Yeah, it was 18 inches. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one thing, and you probably know this just as well as anybody. Like, if you're going to have an outdoor BMX event, you can absolutely plan on rain, or at least it in the forecast.
Yeah.
I just remember that it was like the most torrential downpour, like tornado warnings and everything, and then all of a sudden, like, it lasted maybe half hour, and then it was like the brightest blue skies the rest of the day, but we were rained out. But
yeah. It's one of those things, Andy, that from hosting jams, and I've done my share as well, that the one biggest thing about BMX ever is if you get some good homies together, it doesn't matter if it's just a curb, like in the middle of nowhere, like if it's good friends, you are going to have a frickin' blast. And yeah, the Mucktown Jam, the one I was able to attend, man, we had so much fun. Like, I will never forget that jam. It was an absolute blast.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, every time you've had an event that I swear it says it was going to rain every time, but we lucked out until I don't think it was last year's Corn Nugget, but the year before, but then it was like, and then everybody was still riding anyway.
So this is what's funny is in my history of running Nowhere in 10 years now, every single jam I have ever put on, which has been a decent number, has always stormed in one way or another, whether it's the morning or the night, every time, until we just started indoor building last year, and we didn't care about storms anymore, and the storm didn't come.
Well, don't worry. It'll be all clear skies from here on out.
I know.
Congratulations on your indoor skate park.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So like before we get too far ahead of ourselves, can you talk like a little bit about Nowhere and like when you started it, how you started it, kind of the story behind it?
Sure. We started Nowhere in 2010. I had a BMX company. I started a BMX company when I was 17 years old. Been completely infatuated with BMX my entire life. My dad was a motocross racer for 30 years. And, I was like one of those kids that when they talk about Joe Kidd on a Stingray and they're talking about the BMXers that want to act like the motocrossers, I was that. My dad was the motocrosser, and I'd be hanging out in the pits, building a little jump to ride my little 16-inch Ross BMX bike and like try and hit air like my dad. And so anyways, I've loved BMX my entire life. And I had this company I started when I was like 17. I remember going to all the contests and everything and being like the old Hoffman BS comps and everything. And you'd have guys like selling shirts out of the back of their car and everything. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. Like if you guys remember like Scum Boy clothing or Poor Boy or any of those designs, like I thought it was the raddest thing. So I wanted to start my deal, and I started a clothing company. I was like 17, and I used to travel to Midwest comps while I'd compete and sell clothes out the side of my van. And
what time frame is this?
This is mid-90s
okay.
era.
Gotcha.
Traveled to like the Pit, like Kaiser's Place, and traveled Rampage in Iowa and stuff, and Scrap in Chicago, and traveled all these contests and buy up shirts, sell shirts, and just be a part of the scene. Just I absolutely loved it. And but to kind of speed forward to the Nowhere thing, we had that company for till 2005 or 2006. And then we lost the company just due to likeness rights in the name. We didn't have like the money to back it up with a newer company that had came along that was much bigger than us. So we had to shut down reluctantly. It was kind of a tough time in my life that we had to shut that down because I'd worked so many years and so hard. We're a very small company, but very prideful, a lot of fun. We had a lot of good riders and things were going well, but like we were also very small. I had just sustained a horrible leg injury at the Pit where I blew my leg out and I tore all the ligaments, all the L ligaments and the patella in half. So I went through 3 surgeries and almost 3 years trying to hopefully ride my bicycle again. And during that time, I had lost my company at the same time. So it was the one and only time that BMX was really, really rough for me. And I had to take a step back because my wife and I were barely surviving, and we had 2 little ones and another one on the way. So finances were low. We lose this BMX company that we weren't financially stable enough to fight for. And so I took a step back from BMX for almost 2 years, where I just rode with 2 good friends in a half pipe at my dad's place, which was from a skate park that my wife and I ran, and we lost our life savings within a year running it. Anyways, during that 2 years that I took off from BMX or being a larger part of it, I just rode with like 2 guys, and one of them was one of my best friends at the time, Jason McGinnis, who passed away shortly after that in a motorcycle accident, who my youngest son is named after. And long story short, there's one of my main riders. His name's Dan Nielsen. They call him the Danimal. And he was, when I had last seen him, he was 14, a little kid, and one of those guys that you're like, this kid has crazy talent. And with a lot of talented kids, an ego or something can kind of come about later on. So anyways, I hadn't seen this Dan guy since he was 14. And while I'd taken a break from BMX for a little bit, we went and checked out this new park called Vinny's in Omaha, Nebraska. Mine, Chris Crittenden, and I did. We're like, well, let's just go check out this park. I know we've like kind of taken a step back from BMX for a while, and so we go to this park, and there's Dan Nielsen, and he's an older guy now. He's like 17, 18, and when the last time I saw him, he was 14, and he's absolutely destroying this place. But at the same time, he was still like, he reminded me of a lot of the guys that helped mentor me when I was younger from the 80s, that just had this attitude of everybody have fun and help every kid around them. And Dan was like, we watched Dan do this, helping these little kids learn how to peg stall and everything. And it was that night that it had hit me that even though I had lost my first company and felt like it was kind of just unfairly taken away from me just because I wasn't financially stable enough to fight for it, been around longer, doesn't matter. Dan kind of made me realize that there needed to be more companies in the industry that were focused on helping the riders and helping the industry grow in positive ways. So it was that night my buddy Chris and I had talked about Dan and that the possibilities that I needed to maybe start another company and just be laser focused on helping the industry and helping kids. And came home and talked to my wife about it. Then we started spitballing names and figuring out if we could do something. And I think it was about 6 months later, we came up with the name Nowear. And Nowear derived from the guys that used to ride for my first company. Were all riders that in some way, shape, or form, like Tom Hagen, Tim Oliver, they were all guys that were like from small towns in the Midwest, in the middle of nowhere. And we were still a clothing company at the time, so that was the spin, N-O, and then wear, like clothing, W-E-A-R. So everybody that we'd worked with in the past were from small towns in the middle of nowhere, so that's where the name Nowear started. My best friend, Jason McGinnis, had passed away from a motorcycle accident, and it was a really, really tough time. And we did like a tribute jam for him in Minnesota at Renegade Skatepark. It was a really cool place. And we had a good friend and mutual friend, Eric Cowie in Norfolk, Nebraska, that made these fun videos called Redneck Riders. And he made this new...
And it's so Midwest.
It's so Midwest. He came up with one of his like latest videos that was dedicated to Jason McGinnis, and we sold a bunch of shirts that all the proceeds helped pay for the video and to help preserve Jason's legacy. And it was that night after Eric had released that video, I called up Dan Nielsen and I said, Dan, I want to start a company that is completely laser focused on helping riders grow BMX and do everything we can to do positive things for kids, riders in the industry. And I want that to kind of be shaped around you, because you're just a really good person that cares about growing sport in right ways and just having fun, man. You remember, you know, everybody knows those times where like your jams, Andy, and stuff, you know, they're just made on having fun. And I wanted to build a company around that. And Dan was stoked, and Dan's one of my best friends, and we're 10 years going now. And now Dan's got a signature frame coming out from us. And who knew that this is the point we were going to get to, but
that's super cool.
Yeah. And I think it's like BMX riders from like the old school and mid school era, we kind of always have this kind of feeling of like the good old days. And, a lot of, things just change and evolve, but we all have that feeling of like what BMX events used to be. And when I went to that first event where I met you, I'm like, this was BMX 5-10 years before that I remember. And it was exactly what you're saying, the positive vibes, everybody's stoked on each other. Nobody's, talking shit. And if they are, like some other good rider or humble rider is going to say something. And I really like that about what you guys got going on. So I know that story, but the story I guess I don't know, and I've always wondered is how did you come up, or who came up with the name Crazy Karl?
That had to be your wife.
No. So I remember I grew up kind of low income. My dad was awesome, motocross guy, like gave me everything he could. But BMX was still, kind of an expensive sport, and I was hard on parts, and I want to say 16, almost 17, and I bit my rim really bad on my bike, so bad that I remember it just rubbing like the frame side to side, and the brake won't let the back wheel move very well. So I ripped the brakes off my bike, and it's maybe 93, 94, I want to say at the time. Yeah, that'd probably be about right. Yeah, about 94. Stripped the brakes off the bike, and I'd always had trouble manualing as a kid. And I noticed that once I took my brakes off, that my manuals were starting to dial in better. So I got addicted to that. And I think I was riding a supercross, because freestyle bikes were always like clunky and weird geo, I remember. So we would, in the first like street, or at least in the 90s street era, or beginning 90s, we would ride like race frames, and I rode a supercross. And I remember breaking it all the time, and my buddy was a like half-ass crappy welder, and I'd pay him $20, and he'd like just slag weld it back together, and I'd keep going, and 3 weeks later he'd be welding it again. But having a lot of fun with that. But anyways, long story short, I got my first standard, which was an awesome bike. And I remember, it had the brake mounts and everything, and I cut them because my big baggy pants at the time would catch on them. So I'd go to these contests with no brakes, and it wasn't really a popular thing at the time to not have brakes. So when I would go to like Scrap or Rampage or the Pit without brakes, I remember a lot of guys, questioning or sometimes even giving me crap, like, "Where's your brakes, bro?" And I don't remember if it was like Rick Moliterno or some of the other Midwest guys, but I just started getting called Crazy Karl because I didn't have any brakes, and I'd always try and jump on or off any big thing I could. That was a big, like, that was that era that being street and going big was super cool. And I definitely wanted to go as big as I could and be a lot like those guys. And I was trying that without brakes. And, so kind of Crazy Karl. And then the other nickname we had at the time was Suicide. I remember like halfway through my run, my tricks would be half-assed and kind of sucking, but I'd always look for like, I'd throw like a decent nothing or something. And I didn't have a lot of the, like, a lot of these guys were really good at the brakes, and they could do, at the time on these 40-pound bikes, they could do like foot jam whips and stuff, which was super cool. And I didn't have the skill for that. So I just wanted to do something really big. So I'd stop and I'd look for the biggest gap I could. And then everybody'd start chanting Suicide, and I'd huff myself, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, but either way, it was a blast every time.
What was the scene like in Nebraska? I mean, I'm sure it's growing now because of what you guys are doing specifically. I imagine it's always been kind of tough.
Yeah, there's never really been a scene in Nebraska. I would say like in the late 80s, we had three. We had two really, really good vert riders at the time. Tony Hillhouse, his name was Dr. Smooth, and he was actually a professional vert rider, amazing guy, great mentor to a lot of us kids. And then Frank Stewart, and they call him the Stewbot. And Frank still rides. Frank is one of the most iconic and I'd say underrated riders in the industry today. And but keep in mind, you're talking Nebraska as a state as a whole, and we've got these couple vert ramps and maybe 20 BMXers in the entire state, it feels like.
I guess regionally, it's probably pretty tough too.
Oh, absolutely. And then there was this guy named Chris Wright who would show up at the BMX track all the time doing freestyle. And Chris was an absolute madman. Became like one of my heroes. I got to tell you this quick story. A lot of people don't know about Chris Wright, and what inspired me to like want to go big in BMX is I was at the very first King of Dirt, and I was 14-year-old. Like I think I was 14I at the time, racing ABA, and they have the very first King of Dirt. And Chris Wright, I don't know he's there, but he's our Nebraska guy. And there's these giant dirt jumps. And so we get done racing, and they're getting ready to do this thing that they're starting called King of Dirt. And there's like Hoffman, DMC, like Fuzzy Hall, all these big guys there. And I love this story. So my dad and I are sitting in the audience, and my dad's got his big VHS camcorder, and we're recording this whole thing. And so they're announcing the riders, and they're talking about like Matt Hoffman, you know, and Matt comes out and does a super cool like kick turn trick on the lip of this big ramp, and Dennis McCoy does a little spin trick, and everybody's getting psyched. These guys are huge. And then there's this guy, they announced this guy from Lincoln, Nebraska, Chris Wright, and he's a nobody at the time. Nobody knows who he is. And he goes up to do a simple kick turn, and he like falls. And so you hear people behind like laughing, right? So the King of Dirt starts, and these guys are all big time, and they're freaking awesome. Like we're talking legends, and they're hitting the jump, and they're you know testing it out. Like I don't think they got any practice on this, so like I can't tell you the tricks, but they're all basically trying to table it or you know just feel it out at first. And Chris comes out of the background, very first jump with the biggest, steeziest 360 over this. And, you know, me being a 14-year-old kid hearing, you know, this Nebraska hometown guy and people kind of chuckling when he couldn't even kick turn, sends the biggest, most beautiful 360 over this monstrous double, you know, at the very first King of Dirt, which becomes, you know, legendary where the King of Dirt went and everything. And at that point, Chris Wright just became my hero. And I always like just was clung to him at every race. Then we were there wanting him to teach me this, you know, this freestyle stuff, this big jumps. And so I was always trying to build really big dirt doubles at our local trails and stuff, and trying to be like Chris then after that point. So it was, I just always liked that story. I thought it was cool. But I think I told Andy recently that about a year ago, I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, I've never seen any footage from the original King of Dirt. He digs this old Rubbermaid out, and he's got all these old VHS tapes in it, and he's got it. He's got the tape, and I'm flipping out because I'm going to put it on YouTube, and everybody's going to get excited. And I pop it in, and it had been recorded over with the movie Elvira. So there went that.
That is a huge bummer.
Let's jump into the indoor building. So like obviously you got like a ton of ramps and trails, and kind of had an indoor spot before. Tell me about the building, and like how did that idea come up in the first place?
Okay, so when we started Nowear, my wife and I lived in a small town, Palmyra, Nebraska. And when we had started Nowear, as I said, we kind of focused it around Dan and some kids around this small town of 500 people. They had just busted a meth lab in a neighboring
my kind of town.
Yeah. So they busted this meth lab, and these little 15-year-old kids kept coming over to my house bugging me all the time, like wanting to mow my yard for a few bucks and hang out with me because they'd heard that, like, you know, I used to ride a BMX bike and do some things. And so I talked to the kids and stuff. And what was weird is just getting to hang out with me a little bit. They'd listen to me about life and just like maybe not screwing up so much. And one of the kids was getting in a lot of serious trouble and everything. And I talked to his mom quite a bit, and I made him this ultimatum or this deal that I'd started this new company, and if he got off drugs and graduated high school and stuff, then I'd put him on our Nowear team and kind of being on probation. And that kid still rides for me today. He's one of the coolest and greatest kids in the world, but he avoided like going away to juvie and stuff by being a part of this team that gave him something to shoot for. So my wife and I decided we needed a place to like house or help or provide a community feeling for BMXers or kids who needed a place to go. And because I had known what it was like to be that kid in Nebraska, like needing a place to go. So my wife and I, we didn't have much. We started looking for farms, and it was a crapshoot. Seriously, like we were pissing in the wind with no money. And what do? And we bought our first house during the housing bubble, so like we were going to lose money on our house. But we find this it's just like seriously the craziest luck. We find this foreclosed home on an acreage that nobody was able to buy because of it like split land with another house. And anyways, long story short, nobody was able to purchase it. Like it went to foreclosure and at auction several times, but the title company wouldn't let people buy it. So my family, being in real estate, knew the right steps we had to take in order to get it bought. So we buy this house on 3 acres at the time, and later eventually were able to buy the neighboring 3 acres that somebody else had bought for literally next to nothing. And it had allowed us to then open up a place for kids. We started off with just kind of a decent home on 3 acres, and we moved the half pipe that I'd had at my dad's house out here, and we just welcomed everyone to come ride. And over the course of about 6 years, we just kept building as many ramps as possible and letting everyone know that everyone is welcome here. And we wanted to grow the scene and help today's youth. And 4 years ago, Andy, 4 or 5 years ago, was it? We applied for a FedEx grant, and we did really well, and we got the community behind us and everything. And in 2015, we were a FedEx grant winner. We won a few $1,000s and got flown down to Tennessee. And at that time, we had this idea that let's build an indoor park. And if we'd have gotten first place, it would have given us a really big, start, and we could have like started a building. But a few $1,000s is still really cool. So it allowed us to grow our outdoor setups and do more for the community. But without getting super detailed, we were working with a couple kids at the time that suffered from some drug addictions and stuff. And we would really be able to help them out during 3 out of 4 seasons of the year. But that 4th season being winter, Nebraska, nothing to do. What's there to turn to when there's nothing to do? A lot of times in small towns or wherever it may be, a lot of kids turn to drugs and stuff like that. So we decided we really needed an indoor place so that we could work with kids on a more steady basis. So we started a nonprofit, and we started a Kickstarter campaign, which Andy Heck was a huge help in the beginning with getting the word out and filming some videos for us. And Andy's always, thank you, brother, always been willing to, oh man, my batteries are not fast. Hold on now. It just went from 10 to 20 like it was a joke.
Okay, well, if we lose you, we'll keep going with the audio. But one thing that when I came out there to do those videos to launch the campaign, I guess I was a little naive in thinking how big of a deal what you were trying to do was actually, going to achieve. I was kind of thinking about, there's, the BMX community, it's not very big. You'll have a place for like those few riders, but being a part of the process, from then until now, to see how many people, not just those kids, but it's like their friends and their family, and you guys really are changing a lot of people's lives just with what you're able to do just on your piece of property out there.
I never really understood that saying, an overnight success, but what's crazy is we've put so many, literally thousands of hours, as you know, into establishing the nonprofit, searching for donations, contacting businesses, getting everyone to come together. And so it's almost surreal to look back and see this crazy idea that we had in the beginning, which almost seemed virtually impossible. And now we've managed to put up a several $100,000 setup for $90,000 in donations that we've raised to date. I don't know, Andy, it's wild.
So your indoor park is completely free to ride, right?
100%.
So that alone is super cool. And obviously that helps a huge, group of kids. How is that sustainable over time? Like what is your guys' plan? Can you talk about that or no?
Yeah, absolutely. No. And this is like our BMX just shared, that our free indoor park just, hit a huge milestone and stuff like that. And I already saw in the comments, people asking. It's very confusing to a lot of people. And we were definitely looked at like we were pretty crazy, but I'd love to address that. So the reason I knew this was attainable was we also run a stunt team. And we had ran this, my wife and I have this, farm place that we'd open free to the public with outdoor ramps. And there's a lot of outdoor setups, all over that people use. So here's the way I looked at it. We had a stunt team, and with my wife's in insurance, and we were able to umbrella the liability that we had to have to run a stunt team with our home. It cost a little extra, but we needed to have that security, and people riding our house and stuff needed to have that insurance. So we did that. So we were already paying the insurance. So we were looking at it like, if we establish a nonprofit and we can bring everybody together and we can build it, why can't we just offer an indoor place the same as we offer all our outdoor stuff? So we were only looking at the addition of electricity and heat, and if done efficiently, it should be able to work out, right? And it did. We have this building, we have LED lighting, we have spray foam in there to basically stay temperature controlled. So this winter was our first winter with this spray foam, and we turned on the heat once. And as any of you BMXers know, that if it's over like literally anything without a wind chill, we're gonna ride.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with the building so far. This winter, it never got below like 40 degrees in there, and we only kicked on the heat once. And you put on a hoodie, and next thing you know, you're taking your hoodie off, and you're all having fun together. So
that's funny. I actually think back sometimes, like, I can't believe our parents dropped us off at skate parks in some of that cold. Like,
I was just telling that story last night, how we would be in Burlington, Colin.
Yeah,
we were waiting for a parent to pick us up, and we were like huddled under the half pipe, like freezing.
Yeah. Our parents were like, whatever, get you out of the house. But no, your indoor setup looks amazing, and the fact that you offer it for free is super cool. So.
Thank you, Colin. The one thing, I know this sounds super cheesy, but when some of our local papers and news people have asked us, how can you do this? How can you afford to do this? My one kind of slight cheese ball answer is, how can we afford not to do this? And I truly do mean that, because having been a kid that was subject to a lot of severe bullying and stuff, that I've lost a lot of friends to suicides over the years and stuff like that, and I know that mental torment can mean a lot. So when we deal with a lot of young kids and stuff that are subjected, to bullying and other things, I know the importance of that mental stability. So if my wife and I are well off enough to be able to at least offer something, or a sense of community that can help change a kid's life, my answer is always, how can we not afford to do that? Because I feel like it's almost our obligation as human beings to be nice to each other and to help each other. And if you're in a position that you can do what my wife and I are doing, then 100%, I feel like you're obligated to do it. And I don't know, it's kind of like Andy here. Andy knows, like, Andy's filmed so many of my jams, and he's been like, so when's the jam? And I'm like, yeah, it's this time, and I don't really have any money right now. And Andy's like, I don't care. I'm coming there. I'm going to help you out. And like, but that's the thing. And I think that's been BMX at its core for so long, is there's so many amazing people wanting to help each other. And I feel fortunate that I have an amazing wife and a lot of great friends and great people in the community that we were able to take on this, what a lot of people thought was an impossible task, and accomplish it. And I look forward to all the years that we're going to be able to provide kids and riders with a place to go. And hopefully that'll continue to just be a steel ball that keeps rolling and helps as many people as possible.
Yeah, no, that's super awesome.
I know you're not going to be the one to necessarily admit it, but I feel like you do so much to get that ball rolling. You know, I've seen you donate your collection, and I mean, if somebody needs help, you're going to figure out a way, and I think that's really cool. One thing to follow up on the indoor park is, I know you bought Jason some tools for Christmas. How's I mean, I see that he's been your building partner, at least in the videos. How's that going for him?
That's going great. We've had so many amazing people that have helped out over the years, but during this Corona stuff and everything, we've had all this downtime, and my son's 10, and he's absolutely like infatuated with tools and construction. And so a few of these last steps to the park, he's been down there with me, and honestly, like, that kid now runs a screw gun better than half like 18, 19-year-old kids that come out here. Like, it's crazy how dialed he's getting with it.
No, that's good. I always joke that my 2.5-year-old can use a screwdriver better than my wife, because she just wants to help me with everything. I'm like, no joke. She can pretty much, she knows what she's doing.
Yeah, I'm sure that's kind of a weird thing in general. Like, when you have all these people to help, I'm sure that's awesome, but I'm sure there's some things that kind of hold you back. But I know, a lot of people are probably learning as well, helping you build things out there.
Yeah, it's really cool. Over the years, I don't know if this answers what you're saying at all or not, but I remember this story I love. One of my good friends, Cody Dixon, so when I met him, he was a military guy, and he'd been out of BMX for a while, and he was a little nervous about re-entering the industry because it had been a bit. And he came out to my place, and he was very, yes, sir, thank you, ma'am. He was a military guy, and he's very polite, and he's now one of my best friends. And we're working in our barn, which was our first indoor, like, established place, and we're trying to make these little ramps. And he hadn't done a lot with construction yet, and I didn't notice that I had done this, but he's helping me put on some last pieces on the vert wall that we'd had in this place. And I'm working on something else over here, and he asked me a question about, he's like, hey, I got this going over here. And I walked over and I go, you're going to put this here, and you're doing this here, and you're going to do that, right? And he goes, yeah. And then I walked away, and he goes, I don't really feel like you were so much asking me, but you were more or less like being a dad and telling me how I'm supposed to do it. And I just started dying laughing, because that was so spot on. I didn't realize I was doing that to him, but yeah, in a nice way, I was going over telling him how to do it, because he hadn't done a lot of construction, but the guy's dialed now, and a lot of kids have definitely come out here and learned a lot about ramp building and using tools, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, some of those little things you don't even might not have even realized would have happened coming out of this.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, while we're talking about this, that it's in looking back, the last 3 years of building this building, it's wild because I don't want to forget that, like I said, there has been so many thousands of hours that I remember countless days fighting the Nebraska winters coming. I remember the year before last, we were fighting to get up 10. So like my buddy Sam Bussell, who rides for me, he's out here, like we're out here putting in hundreds of hours trying to cut tin and slap it around the side so that we could protect this structure that had been put up from the snow coming in, because a lot of the stuff we had to buy was used. We bought these 60-foot wide trusses used. We bought all this tin used. We were trying to stretch every donation dollar to the absolute max. I don't want to forget those days, because looking back at those days, like of freezing our asses off trying to get things done and just thinking in goal. And even though that end goal seemed impossible, like we were never going to get there, it's cool sitting in that park with a guy like Sam now and going, holy crap. Like it almost makes me want to cry, like sitting in there each time that I do it now, because it almost doesn't make sense to me how we got here. But the important thing, I guess, is that we did.
Yeah, it's definitely cool seeing everything finally come together. I know you still got more work to do on it too. So
yeah, we want to put in a full pump track, and there's going to be a lean-to shop on the side of the building that's going to have a full line of loaner bikes and loaner helmets, and because that's what we're focused on. Is I really want everybody to always know that the kids that need this the most are usually the kids that can't afford it. So, I mean, you guys have probably all had those friends for the years that can't afford a bike or something like that. Imagine being 13 years old, your parents are struggling, and you'd like to join the sport. If you don't have $200, $300, $400 to buy a used bike, like how do you get into this sport? And we want to bridge that gap and give those kids that opportunity.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you get to that point, let us know, because I got plenty of BMX parts laying around.
Nice.
I know I'm definitely looking forward to getting out there and ride. I'm a little bummed I wasn't able to come out and build some ramps. That was my plan the whole time. But I know we
still have to build the pump track, Andy. I'm saving that for you.
All right.
Are you building a one pump track?
Yeah. So, Colin, what we're going to do once we get through this COVID stuff, like we have our 20.
What COVID stuff?
What?
What COVID stuff?
The Corona.
What's that?
It's delicious beer.
Okay.
So we're hoping that things get opened back up for our big Corn Hucket Jam in September, where the proceeds from that jam will go to our building, and hopefully it'll help finance the rest of the concrete we got to put in there, and then we can build our big wooden pump track. So that way, that'll kind of open it up to the racers, the little kids. You know, you guys know pump tracks are so friendly to everywhere, from little kids to the elderly. Like it's great exercise. It's a lot of fun for everybody. So that's the next big step that we're going to try and get accomplished.
Can you talk about your unique frame designs?
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're super, super low slung.
No, they're not. So
they're not.
No, on the contrary, everybody thinks that because there's so much space there that they're like this crazy low standover. And actually, we provide our Mike Danello signature frames have 8.5-inch standover. Our first designs had an 8, but V2 models have an 8.5, and then our animal frames that are coming out any day now are a 9-inch standover. The reason they look so long is our virtual top tube design. And what the virtual top tube design is giving you all that clearance to help with tail whips, tabletops, whatever. Just that couple extra inches is huge. And we just kind of robbed the mountain bike design. You know, the mountain bike industry has figured out the double V's and the strength of it and everything. And I know that early on when we first wanted to introduce this frame, it it was definitely under some scrutiny because it looked different from anything else that had been put on the market, at least in recent times. But we were American made, and we used a smart geometry. We had felt it was a collaboration of myself, Mike Danello, and Bob Mead that had came up with the design. And then we'd, throughout the past 5 years, we've hired a couple different American manufacturers to help us make the best quality product we could with our unique design. And over the past 5 years, it's just kind of grown. For the guys who don't mind something looking a little different as they roll up to their local skate park, they can show everybody that it opens doors that maybe some other frames don't open for them. So we're really excited. We never planned on becoming a frame company, but I guess that's the story of a lot of different businesses, is you never know where things are going to go. So we're stoked to keep going and keep pushing on.
I think it's a pretty cool step to be at, frame manufacturer. We're excited. You're gonna hate the way I word this at first, but how old are you?
I am gonna be 43.
Okay, so like one thing that kind of keeps me up, like I love bikes. I've always ridden bikes my entire life. How do you? I mean, you shred like hard. Do you feel old, or does bikes literally keep you feeling completely youthful? Or do you have any secrets?
No,
Because when I stopped BMXing like maybe 3 years ago, I was feeling it in my knees and was like, I got to change something, and that's why I kind of switched to mountain bikes. And now I feel amazing.
Yeah. See, no. So I guess I went through that. I had a motocross injury like 12 years ago where I pulled my shoulder out and shoved it in my third and fourth rib. It crushed the ball and destroyed everything. And that was after that leg injury I spoke about, where I tore the patellar and all the L ligaments in half. But early 30s, I could barely get out of bed. And I met this like bodybuilder, like 65-year-old bodybuilder that was working at a local Trader Joe's. And he gave me some advice to change my diet, and that if I wanted to be serious about partaking in, a sport that I had loved, that I needed to make some serious life changes in the way I ate and stuff like that. So I did. I've been vegetarian for several years. I don't do any processed sugars. I've actually taken recent steps to be vegan. Any natural inflammatories I do not add to my body. And as hard as those steps were, because I'm a big lover of and connoisseur of all types of food. I love my BMX bike, and also love my health and want to live a long life with my kiddos. So I'm just trying to be conscious and aware of everything that I put into my body. And that's been one of my big secrets, is just taking care of yourself. And I'm trying to take those steps to do so.
Awesome. Well, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so I just want to throw it back to you to close this out. Where can people keep up with you? Where can they find more information? Where can they see, what the updates are on the park?
If you're following us on Instagram, I'd say that's the biggest thing. The Nowear BMX Instagram, or our Facebook, the Nowear BMX Facebook. We're always posting updates about every ramp we're building, every fundraiser we're doing, every build day we're having, and every event. So I would say just keep following and tuning in. And no matter where you're from, if you're a BMXer and you're going to hit the road, the cool thing about Nowear is we're just right off the Interstate 80, the longest and straightest interstate entire U.S. So we're only 20 minutes off. So just hit us, camp, stay a night. Most of the people. This is the biggest thing I want to stress. So a lot of BMX places throughout the years has been, hey, do you have an in with this guy? Or, that's been the big thing, and give them a call. Dude, you don't have to be a pro BMX rider. You don't have to know somebody we know. You just have to love BMX. If you love BMX, call me, message me. I don't care what skill level, whatever you are, just come hang out with us. If you want to have a good time, we'll have a good time with you. We'll start a bonfire. We'll hang out that night. We'll ride BMX during the day. You guys can camp out, and that's it. Man, we're just trying to give everybody a place to go. So get a hold of us and let's share the love of BMX.